Welcome. Welcome to the Spirit of VMI Election 2021 series, where we're talking to House of the Virginia Assembly, House of Delegate candidates throughout the state. Today, we are talking with Mike Cherry from Virginia's 66th, and I think that's the Colonial Heights and southern Chesterfield County area. Is that right, Mike?
Yes, sir, it is. It's the seat that's been held for the last 32 years by former Speaker of the House, Kirk Cox, and it does encompass all of Colonial Heights and part of Chesterfield County.
You know, I had an opportunity to talk to Kirk Cox and do an interview with him in the gubernatorial race. He's a really, really sharp guy, educator, and knows a lot about the Virginia Military Institute. And I'm not sure what he's going to do after this. Maybe continue to teach, I imagine. But I think he served the state very well. So Mike is a veteran, an Air Force veteran. He's a pastor, he's a father, and he's an educator all at the same time. Is that right, Mike?
Yep, every one of those things. Loved my military service. I served 20 years in the United States Air Force. Was a loadmaster on 141s and C-17s. Transited 6 of the 7 continents in about 75 different countries. Every major geopolitical conflict from Desert Storm all the way through Afghanistan and even beyond. Awesome.
Well, thanks for your service. And you probably feel like I felt and feel is that it was certainly worth it. And if I had the time to do it again, if I had a chance to do it again, I certainly would do it again.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I've watched some of the newscasts and seen some of the reports coming out. And obviously some of the C-17s have been a big part of the footage. And even though I've been retired over 10 years, I feel like I could put on a flight suit and pick up a checklist and go launch a jet right now if they needed me to.
That's awesome. Yeah. I must remember to say this. Talked with Tim Anderson yesterday from the Virginia 83rd down in Virginia Beach, and had the pleasure and honor to talk with Glenn Youngkin a few days ago. Both of them accentuate, and Mike, I'm sure you feel the same way. Gina Ciarcia feels the same way. Tara Durant feels the same way. To get out there and vote early. There's a lot of good reasons to do it, but get out there and vote early. Early voting starts on 17 September. So it's voting season now as opposed to voting day, and ends on the 2nd of November. So get out there and vote early. So Mike, I'm sure you're knocking on a lot of doors and talking to a lot of people. How's it going?
It's going incredibly well. And yes, we're locking on a bunch of doors. I've knocked over 4,000 doors individually myself. Campaigns pushing 10,000 doors that we've touched. Getting ready to do some major student deployments over the next few weekends and really going to push those numbers up of getting the message out. Campaign's going extremely well. I am in the bluest seat held by a Republican, so this is a difficult district to hold. Obviously, Kirk did it, so it is a winnable seat. We've got a great campaign staff built. We've got a lot of momentum. Early polling numbers are looking incredible for us. And so we're really feeling like this is a strong campaign, strong candidate, at least on some level. And we're super excited about this race and absolutely believe we are going to win this without any shadow of any doubt.
That's awesome. Your opponent, I think, is Katie Sponsler. Is that right?
That is correct.
This seat was vacated. So there is no incumbent in this seat right now. So it's a pure walk off between you and Katie Sponsler. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to ask for some in some later questions or ask for some differences in where you guys might stand on some key issues, but
it's first, wide and vast.
Okay. First, because we are the Spirit of VMI, we talk about VMI stuff. The reason why we do this is to see if we can't garner support from the legislature to keep their hands off, keep their mitts off VMI, let them do their thing as much as possible and as much as is wise. So, we want to make sure that the VMI community who may live in your district and or surrounding districts and can affect people in your district, that they would have a reason to vote for you so that you support VMI stuff. So are you familiar with the mission statement at VMI? It's actually not very long, but I can read some of it to you. And I've underlined some that I think is important because of the way the world is going, the way Virginia is going, and the challenges to these things. So real quickly, so a bunch of words, and then advocates of the American democracy and free enterprise system, and ready as citizen soldiers to defend their country in time of national peril. To accomplish this, Virginia Military Institute shall provide to qualified young men and women undergraduate education of the highest quality, embracing engineering, science, and the arts, conducted in and facilitated by the unique VMI system of military discipline. I read that to you because there's, with the introduction of some questionable curriculum that may challenge the free enterprise system, Leninist, Marxist kind of ideas, and then also challenging some of the history and legacy of VMI when it comes to the discipline, which was no fun when you're there, but
Right.
certainly you can see as one of the cornerstones of VMI. Those things, the alumni and actually current cadet structure are very concerned about. So I said enough there. What do you think?
I'm absolutely 100% for supporting VMI in its traditions and in maintaining that honor code and that discipline code. The thing about it, I guess, is, you guys are very unique, obviously, in what you do. There's no one else that's teaching the way you teach, producing what you're producing. And so I think it's absolutely valuable to keep that. Options should be, on the table for everything. And VMI is not for everyone. So I run a private Christian school, and I readily sit down and tell parents, this may not be the school for you. I don't want to be the biggest school. I want people that share our values, that share our trajectory, that are going in the same direction we are. And so I think it's very much the same thing with VMI, in the sense that you're not trying to attract every student in the Commonwealth of Virginia to want to come to your university. You're wanting to bring a unique breed of individuals that have the same commonalities and goals. So I absolutely agree that you should be allowed to keep your code and your discipline and those kinds of things, because if that's not what you're looking for, go somewhere else. There's every other university in the system that gets the same state tax dollars that you guys do. If VMI is not what you're looking for, go somewhere else. Don't try to change the system. Just choose a place that already has your values, your desires, and whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in your undergraduate education.
I copy that, and that's a good answer, and I'm sure one that will be appreciated by VMI graduates. So thanks for that.
Yep.
Let's get to maybe a district or a state issue here with right to work. In 2020, there was a bill that was introduced to challenge right to work laws in Virginia. Without going through a bunch of iterations of questions and see if you understand and all this, we're not playing stump the candidate here. What do you think about Virginia's right to work laws and any challenge to it?
So I think Virginia's right to work laws have positioned the Commonwealth to be one of the top business-friendly states in the nation. And if you go back to prior administrations, Virginia was recognized as the number one state to do business with. Now, CNBC recently came out with a new survey that touted that same number one position for businesses to do business, whether their math was right or not. Nonetheless, they came out and said, we're the number one state to do business. And yet, why would you want to change the process and procedures in the state if it makes it business friendly and you're attracting businesses and it's the number one business state to do business with? So I am 100% in support of the right to work ideals. I think it does promote, you mentioned in your statement a while ago that VMI believes in the free enterprise system. And so I absolutely think that reflects that, and the idea that you're not mandated to join a union and you're not mandated to pay union dues, even if you don't want to be a union member, as it exists in some other states. My opponent, you talked about there'll be some differences. She is a get rid of the right to work. She is 100% pro-union. She touts the fact that states that are pro-union have higher wages. She doesn't then reflect that the states that have the higher wages also have the higher cost of living. So I actually did some extensive studies on this, and the states that have the highest wages and incomes tend to be California, New York, DC, though it's not a state, kind of operates as its own little unique entity. Guess which states are also the most expensive to live with? California, New York, and DC. And so, yes, pro-union, you may make more wages, but you're also going to pay more for everything. And that's the part they don't want to tell you. And so that's why I think right to work is the right model and why we should keep it in Virginia.
Awesome. Good. What about law enforcement? You support our men and women in law enforcement, and increased wages and increased benefits. And I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Absolutely. So a little bit about me. I'm actually a volunteer police chaplain with Colonial Heights Police. And so not only do I say I love law enforcement and support law enforcement, but I actually put on a vest occasionally and put a gun on my hip and go out on ride-alongs and support them. I also do all the death notifications for those that are tragically passed away in our city so that I can take that burden off of our officers. And so I 100% support them. We just came through our budget season here in Colonial Heights. I am on city council in Colonial Heights. We just did a major renovation to the pay scale and made sure that all of our supervisory positions, our sergeant and lieutenants, all got significant compression raises. So what had happened over the course of the last 20 years, I guess you'd say, that the starting pay kept rising. Starting pay in Colonial Heights had come up about 30%. Supervisory pay for our sergeants and lieutenants had only gone up 6%. So you can imagine what happens is now the guys who are coming in off the street are making the same thing as your sergeants and lieutenants. And so we made a major adjustment to make sure that that got fixed, not only for our police, but for our fire and EMS personnel as well. And so you talk about, a pro-union right to work. My opponent has come out as 100% pro-union, and yet the firefighter union endorsed me, because they know that I'm going to put my action to my words and making sure that they had all their equipment they needed, making sure we got that pay compression fixed. And so when it came time for the professional firefighters of Virginia to do their endorsement, they actually gave their endorsement to me, even though I'm not pro-union and I am right to work. They still saw the benefit in voting for me because of how much I've supported them.
Awesome. Well, that's good news. Back to VMI, and first, have you been to VMI before? Have you been to?
I've not. I've driven by on the highway and went, oh, look, there's VMI, but never had the opportunity to come and visit and to see the campus. Obviously, I've seen some pictures. I actually do have a friend of mine whose daughter's in her second year now at VMI. And so I get to see her pictures as they're going through. And last year, as she went through all of everything you have to go through in your first year, and seeing all that, the phases of that and that kind of stuff. But she's super happy to be there, loves it. And so I've seen some pictures, but I've never actually had the opportunity to visit the campus.
Right. You said that you have some people that work with you and that you've actually had that work for you that have been VMI people. What has been your impression about people from VMI?
Always solid. They're always consistent. They're always doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to be doing it. So I had a gentleman, Russ Spriggs, who's a VMI grad. He then went into the Air Force. He was a B-52 navigator while he was on active duty, served as my science and STEM teacher at my private Christian school, which is Life Christian Academy. Loved having him on staff. He was such an asset, especially with our young men. And he actually built programs for young men in our school, because in society now, there's so many broken homes, so many kids that are growing up without dads. They need that positive role model, especially a male role model, that can teach them about the ways of life. And then I actually served with General McDew, obviously a very prominent VMI graduate, rose to the highest levels of the United States Air Force, and served under him as he was my commander in the 14th Airlift Squadron down in Charleston, South Carolina. And he lived a code. And, we were heavy guys. We were the dirties in the back of the airplane, loading cargo, loading passengers, taking care of everything going on. And yet he always wanted to make sure our boots were shined and we had our scarves on when we were supposed to, and that kind of stuff, because that was the code. We were supposed to look and present ourselves in a certain way. And he wanted to make sure that we did that. And so at the time, you didn't necessarily always appreciate it, because you're like, come on, man, what's important? But what you came to realize is everything's important. And yes, they're not the same level of importance, but if you don't pay attention to the little details, you'll miss the bigger picture. And so that was one of the things that General McDew, he was Colonel McDew when I was flying with him, used to really teach us well.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you know, but he was the first captain or the regimental commander, the top military cadet when I was at VMI. 1985 is when I graduated. He's a 1982 graduate, and that story that you just told me about the shine does not surprise me at all. He absolutely was a prominent guy there then, and maintained that throughout his career. I think we're all proud to know Darren McDew. So, thanks for that little vignette. That's awesome. But, back to VMI as a valuable resource. It takes appropriations from from the Commonwealth. Do you think that VMI is worthy of those appropriations? And would you, as an elected delegate, would you take a leadership stance in making sure that VMIs continue to be funded?
Absolutely, 100%. Like, no doubt. That's not even a question for me. Those that would want to take away your funding because they disagree with the way you necessarily do things, I'm sure I can go into UVA or VT or any of these other schools that get state funded dollars as well and find something that I would, think, well, I would do it differently. Not that it's right, wrong, but just that I would do it differently. And it's the same thing with VMI. I don't think VMI needs to change its traditions. I don't think VMI needs to change its code. It's VMI. And if you don't like what you stand for, go to a different school, go somewhere else, because there's probably somewhere else that more closely replicates or reflects whatever it is you would want to change about VMI.
Yeah, and one of the big things is the honor system, which kind of leads to the next question. It's probably the thing that the VMI family holds the most dear, and it's the thing that sets VMI really uniquely apart. I think that was redundant, but from anywhere else is the construct and the conduct of the honor system at VMI. Cadet shall not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate those who do, and all that. That's been, it hasn't been materially under fire in that we are going to change or take out, one of the active words or verbs in there, but just the entire approach to it being unfair and unfairly applied will threaten the existence in the way that it is right now. So knowing that, and I don't know if you know any of the finer points about the honor system at VMI, would you think that there's anything specifically that needs to change within the honor system? And I hate to be redundant, with these questions.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I completely understand, because again, these are the things that are valuable to your membership. And there are things that I think don't need to change. Again, it comes back to the statement I made earlier. If it's not what you're looking for, go to a different school. You've got to understand this is the way things are done at VMI. And if you're not willing to accept that, I joined the United States Air Force. We have a code as well, integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. And so those are the things that I accepted as a United States Airman, that those are the things that I would try to live up to, that I would have integrity in everything that I did. I would put others before me. And I did that through a 20-year career. Now I'll do it as a pastor, is that I serve others. And then I try to strive for excellence in all I do. That's my code, because I accepted that as a United States Airman. And I think this is the same thing with VMI. It's your code. And if you accept it and you want to be a part of it, you submit yourself to it, then I think it has a place. And in that process, you become what you wanted to be when you go to be a cadet at VMI.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll tilt back to your local issues here. So education and school choice. It's an issue that's gained prominence and momentum since the beginning of the COVID stuff that we're living through right now. How do you feel about school choice, while also, ensuring that our public schools are getting the resources they need to operate? What's the deal with that?
Yep. So obviously school choice has become a really hotbed issue. We had some SOL testing results come out this week from statewide, and it showed that by and large, kids lost a lot of ground last year as many schools went virtual. And yet many private schools were able to meet in person, full face-to-face, which is what my school did. We did not mandate masks. We don't mandate vaccines. We have this novel approach to education that parents know what's best for their kids. And we try to partner with them to create that atmosphere for them to be successful. And so I've always voted to fully fund public schools. That's where I always start with education, because many times when people say your school choice, that means you're against public schools. Absolutely not. 100% for fully funding public schools. But I can also support something with my voting dollars and say, yes, it's a good thing. And at the same time say, but it could probably be better. And again, coming back to VMI's statement that you read earlier, free enterprise, competition will always produce a better product at a lower cost. And so if you can create school choice, and you can do that through many different ways. You can do that through a voucher system. You can do that through education savings accounts. You can even do the education savings accounts that are targeted at your most vulnerable in the community, whether those are kids with IEPs or 504s or any of these other challenges to education. And so this idea that it's one or the other, I think is become the problem. We need to educate people that you can do both. You can have enough money to fund the public schools, and you can give parents a choice at the same time, and it'll be beneficial to everyone. You can start charter schools. I mean, there's many different ways to look at this. North Carolina has over 180 charter schools. Virginia has 3. I mean, there's different ways to look at education, public, private, and the combination of the two through charter schools that make education better because it creates competition and it allows everyone to compete for those dollars.
Is your stance different than your opponent's, Katie Sponsler?
Definitely. She is 100% for public education. No money should ever go. Matter of fact, I dare say that if the opportunity were given for her to have the same conversation with you, she would be adamantly opposed to VMI ever accepting a dollar. I obviously came out earlier as pro law enforcement. She's defund the police, prominently displayed on her website is one of the first things she wants to do is defund our police departments. And we've already discussed the pro union stance that she has. So yeah, pretty much everything that I think is valuable in Virginia, she wants to tear up and get rid of and make our communities less safe and not give us any options for schools and that kind of stuff.
Back to the police thing real quick, at the risk of asking a different question or restating the question. I didn't ask this before. So is the crime rate in your area, let's say from Richmond to south of Richmond to Colonial Heights, is it increased over the last year and a half?
It has. And I think it's a direct reflection of the attacks that have gone on in law enforcement and the legislative changes that have been wrought through one-party rule of the Democrats in Richmond. And so, again, I told you earlier, not to beat a dead horse, I'm a police chaplain. I go on ride-alongs often. I would go on an 8 or 12-hour ride-along, and we would do stop after stop after stop after stop, not to write tickets, but to correct behaviors or equipment deficiencies, headlights that are out, taillights that are out, that make our roads less safe. And yet the Democrats in Richmond took all of those away as reasons for a law enforcement officer to stop someone and to correct those things. Again, not writing tickets, but just saying, hey, did you know your headlight's out? It's harder to see you, and the propensity for accidents is going to increase if people can't see you. Get your headlights fixed. And yet they took away all of that. And literally the only reason really that most cops can stop anybody now is if they happen to see somebody with a cell phone in their hand. And so that has made our communities less safe because our police aren't able to positively police their areas. They have to be reactive instead of proactive. And so the crime has to happen before they're allowed to intervene. And I think that's made us all less safe. And I think that is a trend that will continue unless we get some people in Richmond that are willing to stand up and support law enforcement, unlike basically what we have right now.
What do you think about voter integrity, voter ID? Do you think that we need to require identification, positive identification for voting?
Absolutely. So the big thing right now is COVID, right? So anybody who wanted to go get a COVID vaccine, what was the first thing they said before you go? Bring your ID. Because we want to make sure you are who you say you are if you're going to get a vaccine. And yet the most sacrosanct thing we have in our United States Constitution, which is voting rights and choosing our elected individuals, they took away the idea that you need to bring a photo ID with you to vote. That's just the basics for me. I was part of, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. You look at what we did in Iraq in setting up democratic elections. And what would happen? They would have to go and they would have to show an ID, and then they would dip their finger in indelible ink. So we knew who had voted. We knew whether they had voted. And there was no cross-referencing. There was no chance for anyone to vote twice because you only had one index finger that was painted purple. And so if we can do that in a third world country, how much more should we be able to do that in the most advanced nation on the planet? There's so many ways we could secure this to make sure that, you have a debit card in your pocket, right? And if you buy something, your wife can get a notification that you used your debit card, where it was and where it was spent. And yet they can use that same technology for voting, and they won't because they don't want to secure the elections. They don't want the idea that one vote, one person, because I think they know that, the potential is there that their policies aren't popular, and the potential for cheating is out there. Whether it happened in 2020, we could speculate round and round and round and round and round. just the idea that there was the possibility of it is enough that we should work as diligently as we can. Hey, let's go back to indelible ink, man. Let's walk around with a purple finger for a couple of weeks. I'm good with that. But then we'll all know.
Tech is not always your friend. Yeah, that's right.
Then we'll all know. It was simple, and yet we all knew who had voted and who had. What a novel concept.
So in addition to supporting and defending VMI, which is of course one of our hot topics, we also like to hear what the candidate is going to do, what the elected official is going to do when they get on the job first thing. So first thing, on Monday morning, or I guess it's whenever on Monday morning after you were sworn in, what are the first three things that would be priorities for you for your district?
Number one is education. It'll always be education. As an educator, I see every day the challenges of public education, of private education, and how we can all come together to, again, create a better product that will work for our students, and what that looks like. So education choice, education savings accounts, charter schools, all of those. Education's number one on what I'm going to do. It's going to sound like we're on a rerun here, but then number two is our support for our police, making sure, number one, they're funded. Number two, they're accountable. And see, that's another thing that many people miss. They think, oh, you support the police, therefore you don't support accountability. Oh, absolutely not. We'll come back to the honor code that you espouse at VMI. You want everyone to have the same code. And if you have police officers that are on the street that don't have that same code, they need to be prosecuted. They need to be terminated. They need to be taken off. And there's accountability if you're not going to follow the rules and regulations that are governed by every citizen. This whole idea that cops are above the law or anything else, absolutely not in any way, shape, or form. But they should be funded and trained. The way you get better cops is you get higher pay, because people are going to look at the pay scale of the job you're asking them to do. And a highly skilled person isn't going to take a lower paying job, even unless it's a calling to go be a police officer, which for many people it is. But you want to compensate them for the job they're doing. They're given one of the most dangerous, one of the most important jobs in our society. And yet in many communities, they're underpaid to trash collectors and other people that are in other career fields. Why would you do that? And so the funding piece is to make sure you get quality, trained, prepared, and accountable officers. And then the last thing is getting our economy back rolling. We've got to lower taxes. We've got to lower regulation. I was at a rally last night with Glenn Youngkin, who's running for governor here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Not going to get into Glenn, but I'll just give the 1 second shout out. Love that guy. Cannot wait to serve with him in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Hopefully as our next governor and me in the House of Delegates. But he was talking about the fact that we need to lessen regulation 25% right off the top. I was with a building group organization last week, and they showed me the changes in their building code over the last 20 years. And the book went from this big to this big in 20 years as they get more and more and more regulatory, and they make it more and more difficult to build what they're building, which is houses in this particular instance. And they're like, they tell us to build affordable housing, and then they give us a stack of paperwork this big that says, but you've got to follow all these rules to build the houses. And there's no way to make affordable housing because there's no way to make that stuff cheap because it's overregulated. And so that's the thing that I think challenges a lot of businesses. I talk to businesses all the time. I talked to a gentleman who makes vape juice for the vape pens and that kind of stuff. The tax they instituted on their product last year, a 100% tax. It went from being $6 to produce to $12 to produce for the same size bottle because of the tax they did. I don't think you could look at any other business in Virginia and say, we're going to tax you at 100% and that's going to be okay. And yet that's what they did to that industry. And so we've got to lower taxes. We've got to lower regulation, get people back to work. We've got to stop the extra unemployment benefits that are incentivizing being lazy, and get people back onto the workforce. My wife and I just stopped after church for lunch, and the restaurant's half empty because they don't have wait staff. The food took 2.5 times as long as it's ever taken to eat in that restaurant. We eat there often because they don't have kitchen staff in the back that are cooking. And so we've got to get people back to work. We've got to get businesses back open and restore our economy back to what it was pre-pandemic.
Okay, so why Mike Cherry for the 66th?
Wow, why Mike Cherry? I think I'm a great representative. Again, I mentioned the builders I met with the other day. There was one key thing that we really, really, really didn't see eye to eye on. And yet we had a great meeting because I was able to learn from their perspective about what this issue was. And in Virginia, we're a Dillon rule state. And that was the difference in our understanding of the way government should function. And yet they said, we appreciate the fact that you listened to us. My opponent is an activist. She's not a representative. And if you're on her side, she's all in for you. But if you're not on her side, she's all out for you and won't listen to you and thinks you're dead wrong. And I just don't think that's the way representation should work. You should be able to listen to all sides of an issue and come to the best conclusion for what you think is best for Virginia. And I think that's what I really do. I'm able to listen to people. I'm able to talk to people. I often get compliments. I'm on city council that I explain issues in kind of Barney speak that makes it make sense to everybody. I guess that's the gift of being an educator, being a pastor, is I can make things make sense to people. And so I think that's very important when you're talking about how to represent people, is that you can speak to them. You can speak to them with integrity, that they know what you say you're going to do with character, and that you're there and available to them when they need you. Awesome.
Good. Well, I appreciate you spending time with us and explaining, why Mike Cherry, and for that reason, I think that it's clear and makes sense for the spirit of VMI to endorse Mike Cherry for Virginia 66. So, thank you for what you're doing, and you've got our full support. We'll do whatever we can for you. You betcha.
Thank you.
We'll try to spread that word as much as we can for you. Any saved rounds?
It's just really a thank you for the opportunity. There's a lot of things going on in Virginia right now, and many of them are troubling because I don't think our state's headed in a great direction. I think the attacks on VMI is reflective of that. I think the attacks on law enforcement is reflective of that. And so I think we need a change of direction. And I think 2021 is the year to start pushing back and saying, look, that's not who we are. We're not going to be California East and New York South. We are going to be Virginia again. And so that's what I'm excited to try to do, is to lead us back into the prosperity and everything that Virginia should be known for.
Awesome. So as I close here, Tim Anderson yesterday, when I was interviewing him, he sort of gave me a new branding title, meme, I guess, that would go along with, we say VMI is good because the attacks on VMI would tell somebody something different. And so we like to say VMI is good. And he said, I would correct that. I would say that you should say, thank God for VMI, because it's what it's given the Commonwealth, what it's given the country, and what it continues to do. So Either one of those. Can Mike Cherry say either one of those?
I will absolutely say that. Thank God for VMI. As a pastor, I will say, thank God for VMI.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Like to bang the drum again to say, get out and vote early. Vote for Mike Cherry in the 66th. If you guys live down there south of Richmond in Colonial Heights in southern Chesterfield County, if you happen to be within those lines, and that's then pull the lever for Mike Cherry. Mike, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Blessings.